Hello, I'm Chris Flisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion on astrology, art, and adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore the current planetary alignments and offer insights for coping with change. Educational, informative, enlightening, the Turning of the Wheel is a welcome pause in your daily swirl of constant change. Through intelligent discourse, inspired guests, and educational segments, I will help to enlighten your knowledge of astrology and guide you to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Call in with your questions and speak with some of the greatest visionaries in the time-tested practice of astrology. Turning of the Wheel, Astrology, Art, and Adventure with Chris Flisher, each week on Turning of the Wheel podcast. Hello and welcome to Turning of the Wheel. My name is Chris Flisher. As you know, this is a show about astrology, and I love to discuss astrology. It's a fascinating subject for me. I think it holds so much wisdom and knowledge in it that it really is worth our while for all of us to explore it deeply. And my goal on the show is to try to bring more of you into the world of astrology and enlighten you in ways through the guests that I have and the conversations that we have, to understand the richness of what is in the language of astrology and to be able to use it as a tool to help ourselves grow and evolve and become more perfect human beings, which is, I suppose, our goal, right? So without further ado, I do want to remind you quickly about my newsletter, though, that goes out every Sunday afternoon at 1:30. You can subscribe to that from my website, chrisflisher.com or turningofthewheel.com, or my website, so you can go on there and do that. And that's a great way to keep in touch with me if you want to, and you'll understand who's coming out for my shows and stuff like that. Anyway, it's my great honor today to have my friend Michael Lutin on today. He's calling from New York City. I'm calling him, actually. And we're going to be discussing a wonderful topic from hopelessness to commitment, and it has to do with the planet of Chiron, which is sitting right on the edge of the very last degrees of Pisces now. And so it's a great honor, Michael, to have you on today. Thanks so much for coming on the air today.
It's wonderful to be here. I had a good time last time, and I'm thrilled to be honored to be with you.
Yeah, so, I love the idea of this subject. This is a great topic that you brought to the table, and I'm curious what your take on it is.
Well, a lot of people don't pay much attention to that because Chiron, they call it an asteroid, whatever it is, it's a planetoid. It's powerful, and it was discovered in 1977, and even at that point, very few people paid much attention to it. It is about 60 years in its revolution around the sun, and it's come back now to where it was in the end of the 60s. So if you happen to be alive in between 67 and 69, you are now having a memorable recurrence of that event, of all the events that you went through in the 60s. If you were not alive then and you were born after, then you better check your parents, because they certainly are reliving something. I hope they don't wear their tie-dye clothes around, but they are reliving something and a commitment that was made back in the 60s. So it affects people who are 60 and over, and it certainly affects younger people in an unconscious way because they're having this for the first time. It is really a crisis of identity and morality, where you must get over your regret for making mistakes, forgive yourself for making mistakes, and try not to make the same mistake again. But what it puts people at the end of their rope, because that's what 29 degrees Pisces is. In the Christian myth, 29 degrees Pisces is the agony of Christ in the garden, thinking that he made a fool of himself. Why did he do this? He was stupid. He could have had a nice life. But it is the consequences of making a commitment to helping others less fortunate than yourself. And that's the only thing that actually makes you feel better, when you find meaning in life, because your life becomes very empty and boring and old.
Yeah.
When Pisces at 29 degrees, you're really sick of it. And you know you need something to discover new meaning. And until that happens, you're very down in the dumps, and you're at the end of your rope, and you think there's nothing left, because there isn't anything left. You've lived a whole cycle of life, and you've got to find something new. That's where people are. They're each person in a very private moral crisis. Do you find that, Chris?
I certainly do. I think that is the most profound statement for what the collective populace is going through at this point in time, because we are all at this crossroads of despair. I think it's a very deep despair that's there. So this is very appropriate and very timely if you think about when we look at the cultural landscape of the country right now.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that people always find a reason to blame it on. It's the government. It's the aliens. It's Trump. Everyone finds desperately seeking some reason, some scapegoat. And that's really what the whole Christian myth was about, was finding a scapegoat. And what 29 Pisces is who's going to be the patsy? Are you going to be the patsy? Are you going to be the scapegoat? Are you going to be made a fool of? And is it true that if you give yourself completely to something or someone, you're opening yourself to being made a fool of? Or are you doing the highest possible thing to make a sacrifice for those you love or something you love?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happens to people when they don't have anyone or anything in their life. If there's nothing that you really value more than yourself, if there's nothing that takes you away from this plane of boring existence,
you have to go seek that out.
part.
Yeah, you've got to seek that out, and that is something that's worthwhile. I mean, we can certainly. I think this is a great way to sort of take. I always get this phrase mixed up. I think either you make lemonade out of lemons or lemons out of lemonade. I forget which it is, but this is a situation where we take maybe, like you mentioned, a situation where we are alone or we don't have that commitment. We find a way to channel it into something worthwhile. Your comment at the beginning was very right on, because there's no greater manifestation of what it is to be human than to give back to the world, whatever that may be, out of charity, out of kindness. Is to give, is to be of service to others, is where we get our greatest sense of accomplishment, and the great benefit comes from that.
But people feel they're out of gas.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have anything, and they don't think they have any inner resources. Not everybody, of course, but even people who are committed to something, they know it has to have a new venue. It has to have something regenerated. Mm-hmm. And that can never be found outside. There's nothing outside that's going to find that. It's that you have to go into your deepest possible self, and that's being alone, completely alone in this. You are completely on your own when you get out of the inside and you're meditating. Even when you get to meditation, and meditation and prayer are the only roads to get to this place, because it's all on the inside. And when you get to a certain point, you hear, now what?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you have to discover your choice, your decision, what you are going to do next. And it will take probably until Chiron gets to 0 Aries for the final time next spring. It's going to go very soon. It's going to go from Pisces to Aries and then back into Pisces.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to the Christian myth, it's like Christ waking up on Sunday morning, stretching, feeling good, and somebody says, "No, get back in there. You're not done yet."
Right. So there's this sense there's a sense of tension that sort of underlies this, because we have to find the right outlet for where to aim this sort of this energy. We've got to find that outlet. That's what the self-discovery process is all about, right?
And it takes it's going to take many months to let go of the past. You can't just do it quickly. Mm. It's like, you're leaving, like, let's say you're getting a divorce, or some people are very ill. The miracle happening is how to be able to let go in peace and love. And it's easy to talk about. It's so easy to talk about peace and love. But when you have to give up a whole way of life, not even have to, when you know it's time to change, it's just easier said than done.
Oh, it's very difficult. Yeah,
it's very, very difficult.
And I think that and when you talk about that, you sort of have to have what I would call, quote unquote, a come to Jesus conversation with yourself, sort of a, no holds barred, a complete and utter transparency with yourself. You have to be honest with yourself in this conversation. I think you've got to dig deep into yourself and say, and what you can only do, like you say, when you're meditating or by yourself. This is a solo project, and I think that
Yeah, it's true. No, go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
the solo project is important because it really puts you in. You're in the mirror, and you cannot. There's no one behind you. It's just you, and you've got to figure this out on your own. That may be a difficult challenge, but I think the process is well worth it, especially when you come out the other end.
What makes it difficult, Chris, is some questions have no answer.
Yeah.
Some questions of morality and the crisis you're having with identity and the choices you have to make have no right answer. They only have living with the consequences of making a choice.
Right. So there's a bit of a gamble there. There's a gamble there, right?
That's right. But there is no right answer.
Yeah. I guess you don't know that till you've taken the leap, right? Sort of leap in the net, jump and the net will appear, so to speak.
And once you make that choice, then you are there. Mm-hmm. And you can't go back. Right now, it's a back and forth situation.
Do you think it's a trial and error? Trial and error?
Well, yes, in a way, but no matter. Let's say people are talking about a divorce. Let's say,
mm-hmm.
and they try a trial separation. Then they come back together. Then they have the separation. Then they come back together. There's a moment when you're going to go from 29 Pisces to Aries that you have to actually go and march forward into the darkness of choice. Yeah. And live with the consequences and make a better life for yourself. Mm-hmm. Because the life you're looking for a life that has more meaning, more value. And how are you going to do that? That's good. Suppose you're going to go into finance because you didn't before. Suppose you're going to leave finance. Whatever it is, it's going to be a major life turn in the path. This is really the road not traveled.
Yeah.
It is the road not traveled because zero Aries. Now, everything goes over to zero Aries. Planets do it all the time. But Chiron does it only once every 60 years. So that's why the last time this happened, we can blame Yoko Ono. I think we should blame Yoko Ono for breaking up the Beatles.
Right.
Because that's when she did that.
Mm-hmm. Well, every run has its limits.
But what happened in the 60s really ended with the Manson thing.
Yeah.
In 69.
For sure.
That ended the idealistic period that all of the hippies were living. When you see pictures of, you know what I saw? I think it was on Facebook. I think it was in a magazine. Do you remember seeing the magazine cover? I think it was Rolling Stone from Woodstock. It was a young couple, and yep. I think he was wrapping a blanket around her.
I think it was a flag he had wrapped around her. I do
was
remember
it a flag?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was such a romantic picture, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're still together.
Yeah.
And there was a photograph taken and was printed next to that young picture. They're in their late 60s, 70s. It was fantastic. It was so inspiring.
Yeah, it's very very heartwarming.
Romantic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was terrific. Yeah.
There was
it is not only the bad consequences of commitment, it is the fruits of your choice.
Right. When you think back to that time.
So if you were born in that.
You think back to that time. You think back to that time. I mean, that was a very, very fractious time. The New York Times has been talking about the anniversary of Martin Luther King's death. That happened in 1968. Shortly after that, Robert Kennedy was shot in 68. Then we have Charles Manson in 69. All these events were happening at that same point, and it's very, it's very dramatic. And I think there,
Chiron was at 29.
Yeah, there was the end of the innocence in that point in time. We no longer had this flower power kind of innocent naivete that said we can solve the world. I actually believed. I was alive then. Lived all through that. I was a teenager. I remember very well how I felt. I thought, wow, this is great. We are going to change the world. We're going to set everybody straight. And we did have a very good idea. It just didn't work.
But it happened, Chris. So many people lived it. So many hippies were able to integrate themselves in their lives and do things that were for the world. And we don't know if maybe they did save the world in their own way. At least in their own sphere they did. So the people who made that commitment, look at what you're doing now. You're doing this radio show. You are also following what your commitment was in the 60s.
Right.
You're still doing it.
Yep. I know it's a long, hard road sometimes, but I think that's part of the challenge. That's, the nothing worth having ever comes too easily, as they say.
And it was and there are some people that I see now, I call them WTTOWs, and those went to the original Woodstocks.
Oh, yeah.
And, I see them with gray ponytails, and I think a lot of, I have one friend who never got over it. He's still living in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
But some people have made lives doing things with morality and consciousness and still made a prosperous life for themselves. Now, it doesn't look like that when we see what's going on with the world. Did I tell you that I'm in the 1%, Chris?
Yeah. Which 1% is that?
I'm making 1% of what I should be making.
I love that. I'm right with you there, but I guess we're both 1%ers then.
Yeah, I'm in the 1%. So I'm really thrilled about it.
Yeah, I can tell you're overjoyed.
I am overjoyed to have made this choice. But I people ask me, well, what would you say that your mission statement is? What is it you say that you do? And I think about it and I say, what I do is I make my living in prosperity, helping people do what they want to do best and help them face their greatest challenges while making them laugh at the same time. That's my whole mission statement.
That's great. And, humor is the great equalizer. It does bring people to their sense of humanity and stuff. And, when I think about those times, and I grew up then, I had a very Pollyanna-ish kind of view. I'm not even sure that's the right word for it, but I felt sort of innocently enthusiastic and really filled with this great sense of hope and promise that we are really changing the world here. I lived in a commune for years, and I thought, wow, this is the way to go. We're all pulling together. We are tribal. We can get through this. We are stardust. We are that whole line from the song. And I've totally believed it, and I still, at my core, I think, do believe that is still possible. I just think there's been a lot of...
You're doing it!
Yeah.
You do. What do you think this conversation is about?
No, I get that.
Anybody listening to this is actually being, in some way, informed about what we are doing with our lives, right?
Right. No, that's true. Yeah.
So the thing is that we're carrying on what we can do, but we're in a time of great struggle because there's a dark force that has entered the world. And I'm not saying this happens to be the President of the United States. That's not it. There's a dark force that has come into the world through the south node of Pluto. Pluto is passing over its own south node. It's crossing over into the south part of the ecliptic. That happens only once every 200 and something years.
Right.
The last time it happened, it was the American Revolution, which had many good sides to it, but it was very bad for the natives who lived here.
Right.
Because Pluto over its node is often about throwing people out of where they live. It's always about landlords and the usurping of property. Pluto on its node in Capricorn. Mm-hmm. And it's a tremendous kind of racism, and there's genocide in it. And the first time that Pluto went over its south node in Capricorn, when it entered, was the time of Pontius Pilate and Caligula. So there's always a dark side to it, and we're living in a time right now where there is a very dark thing happening in the world. Whether or not that there's an alien consciousness involved, a lot of people really believe that there is some intervention, some alien intervention going on, and some people think it's just selfish bastards. Mm-hmm. But there's a dark thing happening where people are being crushed, kicked out of their places, usurped of their property. You should see what goes on in New York. I'm sure it is where you are. So many empty stores. Do you have that where you are?
Oh, yeah, gosh. That's just an epidemic source where you're going to see empty stores and malls being turned into, I don't know what they're going to do with all these malls that they've built. They're going to turn them into senior citizen homes is what I think they're going to do because that's
what I heard they were going to do.
There's no other place for them to go.
I heard that too.
It's a great idea. I mean, it's a good repurposing. But, the dark void that you're talking about is there's a cyclical nature to that. We've seen it in the past. And I think that it it is a change agent of sorts, because if we did not endure that, if weren't made aware of that darkness, we would no longer try to strive for the light. We would be complacent. So in some ways, this is a catalytic moment for us that we have to embrace and take it for what it is and try to make it better. I think that's what has to get us off our seats.
We have a life of duality. There's the sun and the moon, and we live a life of duality. There's light and there's darkness. So at night it's dark and daytime it's light. We have to cope with the darkness as well as the light. That is how we are created and made. It's changing now because we have a lot of moons. We don't have just one moon anymore. We have a lot of artificial moons. Our consciousness is changing, and with planets that are being constantly discovered. There's a planet beyond Neptune called Haumea. It was discovered in 2004, and its myth is about fertility and reproduction. And we are now in an age where the whole gender question is changing tremendously. It's not simple. In the old days, it was simple. There were two genders, male and female. It's not simple anymore. And it's never going to be simple again, because as planets are discovered, the consciousness of the people living on the Earth will change also. So Haumea's presence in consciousness is going to change us. Just as this is the first time since Pluto was discovered that it went over its south node.
Right.
And it wasn't 200 years ago. In 200 years ago it was. In 1930, it went over its north node. So Pluto over the nodes is not necessarily great. It just changes definitely world events.
And we look back at history when that happened. That was a tough time.
It's always history, yeah. So Pluto, this is the first time it's gone over its south node since it's been in human consciousness. And when planets are not in the human consciousness, we act with less conscious responsibility. We are hoping that we don't kill ourselves and blow ourselves up. We've done a lot of damage with a lot of damage to the Earth and to human beings and to relationships. Can we survive this? The answer is not written. We're on the brink of something, and it takes everybody's effort, not just to recycle their trash, but it takes everybody's effort to recognize and accept the reality that there's darkness happening and still live with morality and consciousness to counteract any of the atavistic and primitive instinctual drives that are prevalent in the world today.
But I think if we didn't have that challenge before us, we wouldn't act. And so some ways you can argue that this is a necessary evil, I guess is a good way of putting it. We have to have this kind of response. We have to face this kind of dilemma in order to progress and move forward. I think that's just like in astrology. The challenges come from the difficult. The growth comes from the challenge.
It's like living, it's like living with people you can't stand. That's what makes freedom.
Yeah, it's true. And that's where the compromise comes in. And that's one of the beautiful things I like about astrology, to be honest. It's one of the core values that I always adhere to, is the fact that we obviously don't have the same makeup, the same characteristics in our charts, but by knowing what those characteristics are, it allows us to find forgiveness and tolerance, I think, overall.
Yeah, I have to answer this question because they sent me a questionnaire that they're going to put in the United Astrology Conference brochure, I guess. So they asked me, one of the questions is, what is your least favorite planet? And I wrote, I'm still composing my answer, but one of the things is I answered, I said, I am not a planetary racist.
Right.
But I will say this, they can all be bad if you let your imagination run away with you. Even the ones that are supposedly good. So there is no good and bad, and if you get over that, you recognize that every planetary aspect is to teach you something.
Right.
They did ask me also, what is my favorite thing to do? You know how I answered it?
No.
I said my second favorite thing to do is to go surfing, body surfing in a clean Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
And she said, well, what's your first thing to do? I said, I'm not telling you that.
That's funny. You know, I I don't think I have a planet that I dislike more than others. I don't really have any bias towards any of them. I just think of them as characters in a great play that's there, and I don't.
It's all to tickle your fancy and see how you react to it. It's all an illusory little shadow play that's going on to see how you're going to react. And are we all fated to act a certain way, or is there a grain of choice that we can respond in one way or the other, or are we all destined to respond to a certain way? I believe that there is a spark of consciousness that gives us knowledge and a choice to react differently, and not out of ignorance. But I believe that, but some people don't. Some people believe that it's, that if this planet is in the place, this is going to happen, and this is how you'll react.
Yeah, I don't buy that either. I don't buy that, because I've had planets. I have had planets which I thought were malefic and had tough and have had harmonious angles to malefic planets, and have had good things happen, and have had just the opposite happen to me. So I don't go by that either. And I agree with you. I don't think that there's something. It is for every planet. Every planet has dual qualities to it, is what I would say. I'm sure.
Yes.
And they all have.
And I don't believe in decorating a tombstone with cake frosting. I don't do that.
Right.
I try to tell what I see. But since Freud and Jung and many thinkers have arrived, we're living in an age where choice is something that a lot of psychology believes in.
Yeah.
And I think the ancients, who had fantastic knowledge of predictive abilities, they did not see choice as openly as we do, and it's a dichotomy in astrology. Part of it is completely written. Once you get that horoscope, you got to live with it. Whether you chose that family or the stork opened its beak to burp and they dropped you through the chimney of Charlie and Doris, whatchamacallit. Whether that's the case or not, you have to live with that horoscope. And afterwards, once you've got that, is there a choice of growth? I believe yes.
I do too. And I think what it is that we are placed, like you say, for every chart for every horoscope that we are landed with, or our own, is our fingerprint, it's our personal DNA. We have the ability to use that energy, and in one of two ways. We can either use it as a potential for growth and step into it and use it to our advantage, or we can let it bring us down. I think that's a dualistic approach.
Some people think that we are actually magically thinking to think that. That's what some people believe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it, you can take any tragedy or any difficult time in any person's life, and you have an option of going one of two ways. I mean, you can either step into it and embrace it, or you can let it bring you down. I think that's kind of the nature of the planets in the same capacity. That's what you're referring to. We have that. So, if something didn't break, we would not fix it. If something breaks, we have to fix it. That's our choice.
But is that our rationalization?
Well, that depends.
I don't
upon the
know
person.
the answer to that. There's a big hullabaloo going on in the astrology world between fate, free will, and choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's room for both in astrology, because it's a question. It's one of those questions that does not have a final answer. I believe that.
Right. I don't think it does either. But I think that we. Free will is a huge process. It's a huge topic that's involved in this, as you mentioned. And we do have free will. I think that we are given a chart at birth, and we have a choice to make as to how we direct that chart, how we live with those instructions. I think of it like an owner's manual. So we live with that owner's manual. It tells us to do this, to do that. And we have a choice we can either redirect it and make it work for us, or we can have it bring us down. Everybody's got difficult times in their charts. There's no question about it. How you work with that. You take those squares, those difficult things, and you use them as opportunities to step up. It's like a 90-degree step. Take that step up. You're climbing the ladder. You're making progress. That's what those challenges are there for.
I believe that also. Yeah. I do. That's because I do my work. That's what I do for my work.
Right.
But some people do not.
Yeah. We are talking today with Michael Lutin, having a great conversation about from hopelessness to commitment. It doesn't sound as bad or as dire as it is, although maybe there are parts of it that are. But while we're going to take a quick break here, but Michael, your website is michaellutin.com. He's got a spanking new website. I encourage you to go there and see what he has to say. He also has a private club for which you can join, which is very helpful as well. That's Michael's little little private secret behind the doors club. That's Michael's speakeasy, so to speak. And it's on his website, Michael Lutin, Lutin is the last name, michaellutin.com. We'll be back in about 2.5 minutes. We'll continue our discussion. In the meantime, be sure to check out his website. And I encourage you to join that little back room there. You never know what you might find. And we'll be right back.
What is your destiny? Where are you going? What is your real purpose? Do you know? Do you want to know? Of course you do. It's your duty to yourself. We are all here for a reason, and we all have great potential. Discover all of this and more with a professional astrology reading. My name is Chris Flisher, and I can help you. Discover your strengths and work on your weaknesses, and live your life to its fullest capacity. Based on your birthday, birthplace, and birth time, an authentic astrology reading will allow you to live your life to the fullest and reveal your true purpose. Only real astrology can give you real information. It is your destiny, and it is your path. Write me at chris@chrisflisher.com and book a reading today, or call me at 978-393-1036. That's 978-393-1036. www.chrisflisher.com.
Astrology is the science of spirit, and it can serve as an invaluable aid in making the difficult choices in life and seeking truth in all the directions we choose. It holds the potential to allow each of us to evolve to our highest potential. It is the logic of the universe, the code of existence, and the pathway to true wisdom. It is our duty to draw from it the instructions for our lives and to live them to our fullest potential. As the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed.
Hi, your host, Chris Flisher here. I've been producer and host of this podcast and radio show for the past 10 years. My goal has always been to provide enlightening, progressive, and logical discussions about where we are as a species and how we move ourselves further down the road towards our greater potential. I believe astrology provides a great tool for observing our progress and awakening our consciousness to becoming a whole, better, and more complete individuals. I have sought to invite the best contemporary guests, thought leaders, and progressive minds to discuss topics that concern us all, regardless of your beliefs. Consider making a contribution through PayPal to help keep the great wheel turning so that I can continue for the next 10 years along the same enlightened path. As always, I thank you for your support.
Okay, welcome back to Turning of the Wheel. My name's Chris Flisher. My guest today is the one and only Michael Lutin, and we're talking about a wonderful topic which deals with the planet Chiron, well, actually the asteroid Chiron, that is sitting right on the edge of the great wheel right now at 29 degrees Pisces, about to enter into Aries for the first time in 60 years. And the topic we're talking about is from hopelessness to commitment. And the idea of that is that we may all feel right now as if we're in a state of dire, we don't quite know what to make of things. We look at the news headlines, we're bombarded by information, we get depressed, we get anxious, people are nervous about what's going on. And we have reason to be nervous. We've got, nuclear war on the topic, we've got all kinds of things. But we also can see this as a time of great catalytic opportunity to sort of take that same potential energy and manifest it in a powerful way. And Michael suggests, as you did very earlier, that we turn that into something where we have this inner conversation. Now, when you talk about that inner conversation, that's you and you and you and you and you only, just you and you together, having that conversation, trying to find out the best way to go. Is that right?
Yeah, I think even if we have a nuclear war, all those people born from 1994 to, 1994 to when did Pluto go? 2007, right?
2008, yeah, 2008, yeah.
No.
Oh.
Before that, from 83 to 94.
Okay, gotcha, right, yeah.
They all had Pluto in Scorpio. If there's a nuclear bomb, they're all after there's nothing left but ringing telephones and roaches. They're going to stagger through the mushroom cloud and say, "Shit, that was cool. Let's do that again." All those kids with Pluto and Scorpio they're not going to care about a nuclear war. They're going to get over it.
Well,
so I don't know. I think that every generation that's born copes in its own way with the world in which it is born.
Oh, I agree with that.
And people who are older see things. And when you get older, you have more to lose. And when you get older, it's more frightening to you.
Yeah, they have a certain resiliency, and I can see it in some of my clients who've come to me who have that aspect, or that at least that position of Pluto. There is a certain depth there. They're not afraid of things that I was afraid of at the same age. They sort of revel in the dark side in some ways. I've got, even some of my children who are born have that tendency, and it's a very powerful tendency to be. My youngest son was, when he was 8 or 9, was absolutely fascinated with Alfred Hitchcock. He was born in '92, and I'm like, wow, why is this kid so fascinated with Alfred Hitchcock? It's that Pluto in Scorpio. It's that dark side that doesn't scare him as it did scare me when I was younger.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that, I mean, I remember my parents, they were supportive of things that I did, but they also sort of shook their heads too, because older people can't really figure out how young people are going to survive the things they do.
Right.
And that's just part of a generation gap. It's part of the Pluto gap. People who, whatever your Pluto is in your horoscope makes you seem cool to everybody else who has the same Pluto. And to everybody who has different Pluto, it makes you seem like a jerk.
Mm-hmm. It's a very powerful presence in the chart. And so as we go forward and we look at this coming up into this time and this time frame, it is an opportunity for us to expand. There's no question about it. I mean, I think for every time of strife, there's an enormous potential. Potential exists, at any point in time. Whenever there's a difficult aspect or a difficult transit, the potential exists to do something with that energy. That energy is sitting there just ready to pop open, I think.
There's just not an answer right now.
Like a soda can. You pop a soda can, you get that spurt.
Yeah.
And sometimes the cans,
and
sometimes the liquids.
You have to make a choice.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's true. You have to make a choice. Which way do we go?
You have to make a choice of what you're going to do, which road you're going to follow. And you're going to have to, no matter how you do it, you're going to have to let go of part of the life you're living right now in order to make that choice. And of course, planets go over 29 Pisces, 0 Aries every day of the week, or every month, every week, and it's always happening.
Right.
But when there's a planetary body that makes a position, that passes a position only once in a very long time, it does create consequences in your life.
It certainly does, and how you approach that depends upon where it is in your chart and how where it's transiting, what planets it's touching, and how it's going to manifest itself in your own personal life. And I think that is an opportunity if you can approach it this way, and you have to be able to be open to the idea of what that change is like. So with the sacrifice comes also a benefit. I think there's a benefit that comes there. It's the duality. You sacrifice one thing, but you gain something else.
Totally true.
And that's the idea of the hopelessness. So whatever hopelessness we now feel, we have to have faith of some sort, or at least a burning ambition to find the commitment that's at the other end of that. And where does that go? It's sort of a time when
there's nobody can answer it for you.
Right. It's a very difficult question. You've got to make a choice. I mean, does it mean ending a relationship? Does it mean leaving a job? Does it mean selling your house and moving to a new place? Does it mean any number of things? And it can be as bold as that, and it can be even more subtle than that. It can be choices that you may make regarding how you operate with other people, the friends you choose, the associations you keep.
It's a metaphysical choice, too.
Yeah, it's a metaphysical choice. You've got to be able to determine how you want to do it. But I think you're right. This is really a time when people have to sort of pull inward rather than outward. And I think that the reason that may become difficult, or people may think of that as being an unsavory kind of exercise, is because we are distracted in so many ways. We tend to veer away from that because there's hard work involved. There's hard work involved. And that's what people veer from.
Well, I think if you're a believer already, in something higher or something that's invisible or inward, then you are now questioning whether that was ridiculous to follow that road or not. If you are a non-believer, you're in a different place, but the same place. If you've been a non-believer, you're recognizing there may be something higher you have missed.
Right. And this is a very good dialogue to have, because I remember my father, when I was very young, my father was an Episcopalian minister, of all things. And he would always say, he was a very wise man, very deeply philosophic, and he was not, bound by a lot of the sort of the Christian dogma. He was a very open-minded, kind of liberal, very progressive kind of guy. And he always said, the strongest believer is he who doubts. And I love that idea, because it shows that there's not a sense of blind following. You're not a blind follower. When you doubt, when you are a skeptic, when you doubt something, you are exercising your ability to rethink what's going on. And I think that's a healthy discussion, as opposed to just blindly following along. I love that idea. I think that applies. I think that applies to this.
It applies also to the leaders of the world right now.
Yeah, it does for them, for sure.
They're all filled with doubt.
Well,
they're all filled with uncertainty. They're all just as nervous as we are.
You think so? You do?
Yep.
Because they're entering new territory?
I believe they're all just as nervous as we are, because all of humanity is moving on the same wave.
That's true. That's true. They'd have to feel the same thing. And so their responses are based out of that nervousness and that uncertainty? Is that what prompts their responses and their actions?
When you watch the news also, the news reporters are doing what they're told. They're giving us the crap that they're told to give us, but inwardly they're all very, very nervous about their own lives and their own kids and their own relationships and their own finances and their own health. Everybody in the world is suffering under the 29 Pisces Chiron.
Mm-hmm. It seems like it's a collective malaise of sorts. We're under this deep cloud, trying to find the way through. And I do think, everybody, at the end of the day, no matter who you are, people have children, they have people they love in their lives, they don't want to harm them. Those are very personal things, and that's what that was maybe what compels them to have this sense of uncertainty and fear. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That's the big thing that gets everybody.
Well, what are you going to do now? Are you going to do something that's good for you? If you do it that's good for you, it may be difficult for the people around you.
Mm-hmm.
Or are you going to do something that's good for the people around you that will create a sacrifice on your part?
Well, that is the big question. Which way do you go in that? I would always opt in doing the thing that's best for most people, I think. Take the option that's best for most people. And I would even do the sacrifice myself. If it meant I would sacrifice myself if it meant that more people could benefit from my decision than not. In other words, I wouldn't want it to be self-directed or my own agenda.
But that's only you. We can't really speak for other people, because
of course not. No.
Suppose you're in a marriage, you got 3 kids. You realize that you're dying in that marriage,
mm-hmm.
and you cannot commit yourself to it anymore. And that you really want to go and live in the woods by yourself. That's good for you.
Right.
That's bad for your wife and kids.
Well, that's my point. That was my point. So I personally, this is a question we all have to probably ask ourselves. It's a metaphor you're using, but it does point to the larger topic. I think in my particular case, as an individual, I would try to opt to do more that kept the waters calm as opposed to rocking the boat. I think that's what I would do. But as you said, that's a personal choice.
No one ever can live without rocking the boat at 0 degrees Aries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When something goes to 0 degrees Aries, somebody stands up in the boat.
Yeah, I think that's true. I can see that happening. I can definitely see that happening in my own life. And so then you have to say to yourself, the challenge at that point is in that context, that conversation requires that wrestling back and forth of which way to go. And it's the decision you make at the end that dictates the outcome. And it is a real existential question if you think about it. I mean, is it me or is it them? You know, who do you turn to? Who do you default to? What's your default mechanism?
And that's why I really can't make that for other people, because I don't know
right
what's good for somebody else.
But what you can see is you can recognize where the challenges are. You can recognize where the challenges are and help to guide them in that regard and have that conversation with them. You know, it is about decisions. It is about choice. I think people perhaps act hastily just because things get difficult. You can't just run because it's difficult. You've got to be more, cognizant of the long-term ramifications of your decisions and not act in haste.
Yeah, I know. People, that's what they're asking.
Mm-hmm.
What should I do?
Well, all you can do is offer.
What should I do?
Well, and so you're at
what should I do?
You're at that hopeless state, wondering what to do, and the answer is pretty clear. I mean, I don't know about you, but I can see it in my life. I'm faced with these questions myself.
Of course,
yeah.
We're all under it.
Mm-hmm.
I think Jesus Christ Superstar was on TV last week with John Legend. I did not see it.
I didn't either. No, but I heard about it.
I wanted to see it. Was it any good?
I didn't see it. I just heard about it. I had the same thing as you. Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I had watched that. I suppose it'll be, you can get it on Netflix or something. But it was an amazing show at the time. Talk about, the zeitgeist. It was an amazing show at the time. But that scene when he's all alone and he said, after all I've done for 30 years, it's like stupid. And he was thinking how wasteful it was, and yet he went ahead and did it. And there is and I bring the Christian myth up again because 29 Pisces is all about the beginning of Christianity and the age of Christianity and the age of Pisces, mm-hmm. which is now coming slowly to a close. But there was a fantastic novel called The Last Temptation of Christ.
Right.
By Nikos Kazantzakis.
Yep, I remember that book.
And there was a crappy movie made, but the book is beautiful. Mm-hmm. And in the book, I believe that he knows that he's got to make this sacrifice. And I believe that out of all the followers, I think he chose Judas to make the sacrifice because Judas had the most spiritual strength to be hated mm-hmm. all throughout history. It's a pretty amazing twist on it.
Yeah, it is very.
But there are scenes in that where he's suffering, thinking that he may just be an epileptic, and he's not really listening to God's voice at all. He just may be nuts. And that's exactly where every one of us is right now. Are we listening to a higher voice that's directing us in a direction, or are we nuts to not do the practical thing? Because it's a choice always between something that's practical and something that's we're moved emotionally and spiritually to do. Is that true, or are we nuts and just plain mental?
Well, it's the bumping up of those two concepts that makes it difficult. It's because it is in some ways a black and white decision, I guess you could say.
There is no answer.
Mm-hmm. It poses a very interesting dilemma for many people because they do have to make that decision, I think. And I think what happens if you ride it out, do you think, and you just don't make, you become paralyzed, you become stagnant?
Well, if you do that, then the space station falls through your roof while you're sitting there watching television.
Yeah, I could see that. Or the Chinese whatever that was that landed on the Earth this week. There was a giant satellite that returned to Earth this week that was the size of a school bus, and they were talking about it last week. And it landed. Where
did it land? Did they ever find out where it landed?
I think it landed somewhere in the Pacific. I think it's safe. It didn't land in Chicago. We know that. So it landed in the Pacific someplace. I don't think it even hit an island. It's probably just plunked right in the water. It's sitting out there in more space garbage in the sea.
Speaking of Chicago, are you planning to go to the United Astrology Conference?
I certainly am.
May 24th.
Wouldn't miss it for the world.
You're coming with us.
I'm on the UAC Express. Yeah.
You're around the U.S. We're taking a bunch of people on the bus. That's going to be so much fun.
On a train, you said. A train.
We're taking the train from New York to Chicago. It's going to be amazing.
It's going to be fun. It'll be fun.
Yeah, of course you're coming with us.
We're not going to get much sleep, but it'll be fun. Who needs sleep? You know, it's a great gathering of people, and it provides us an opportunity to have these conversations. I think these conversations are very good overall because I don't think people think about it otherwise. I think it's important to step outside of our daily swirl of digital screens and all this other stuff that we're bombarded with and take the time to mull over these ideas because in these ideas is a certain inevitable truth about what it means to be a human being, and we've got to face it. And I think...
Well, that's what's wonderful about the astrology community. Even though now we have all these raging discussions about fate and free will, it's wonderful about the huge astrology community. When I think of when I started astrology, before there were computers and all that stuff, that I can sit in my living room and have a conversation with someone in Australia in the middle of the night about astrology and where it's going and any planetary aspects that are going on. I am so thrilled that the astrology community, which was once very separated and alienated from each other because there was no way to communicate, has now become a world phenomenon that is going on 24 hours a day. Imagine what that is doing to consciousness. Imagine how that in its own way is helping the world to move forward, that we have a world community that is constantly communicating about the things that we're talking about right now. 24 hours a day all over the world. That has some effect, and you can't tell me it doesn't.
Oh, I think it certainly does. I think just the fact that people are subscribing to it, people are learning more about it, they're more enthused by it, which is part of the reason that's part of my reason for doing this show all these years, is because I want people to understand.
Of course it is.
Yeah, and it's really important.
Why we do the things we do. I went to Australia in January for their conference, and Australia was just something that used to be like the thing on the right and the map that you saw in school, but nobody you ever know was going to ever go there. And now it's just a trip. It's not even a long trip. You get on the plane in San Francisco, and boom, you're in Australia. It's amazing to see how the world has been able to shrink through communication and technology, which sometimes I hate, but it has drawn people together and created a psychological and spiritual web of consciousness around the world. And that sounds like woo-woo hippie stuff, but it's actually a fact and a factor. And that's why people gathering together, there's nothing like it. I don't like webinars. I've done a few, but I hate them because I hate sitting in my house alone looking at the screen. I love a live audience. I've always done well with a live audience. I love to present my material in front of people. And that's why what's great about the conferences is it gives you a chance to share your ideas and listen to the ideas of others. I hope your listeners will go to that conference.
Yeah, I think they will. A lot of them sure will. You know, the thing is that, the idea, as this conversation that you mentioned, that this big, gigantic collective conversation that we're having, either with a podcast or doing readings or doing live talks, whatever they are, and the people who engage in that, you're right, they do. It's a very powerful message that has got deep, deep threads that run right into our innermost core psychology, our innermost core psyche, that we are enlivening and awakening in some ways by having these conversations. It brings
it goes out to the universe.
Yeah,
the aliens can hear it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
whoever's listening here can hear it.
As long as they don't land in my backyard tonight, I'll be okay. Well, if they do, I'll let...
Oh, are you kidding? In your backyard, they drop you there. Talking about land in your yard. Where do you think you came from?
I'd invite them in for a cup of tea. Anyway, the idea is that I love the fact that conversation is there. And, the idea, we may be in this time of, sort of collective despair. I think you're right. It is felt on a global basis. Every one of us is connected to each other in some capacity. We cannot deny that. So whatever is happening to the world is happening to all of us. When one person dies, we all die along with that because we're just part of this gigantic continuum. So we feel this, and we can get through this together. And we do have to face this together. And it is a question. It's a moral crisis. It's a value crisis. It's all of these things at one. And we have to come out of this at some point in time, whereby we come out in a positive manner. I believe that we are going to do that. I think the reason it's hard now is because it's going to get better later. Without the hardness, we don't have the ease. So
I'm in total agreement. I believe that it does have an effect. It creates, I think the zodiac is a two-way communication system. The zodiac, the planets operate with their vibrations through the zodiac to us, and our actions radiate outward through the zodiac back to the planets. And it's something like the astrology community, and many communities also. It's not just astrology, but our community is doing something very powerful through its communication and through its actions with the clients and with the students. I think it's not just because we want people to believe in astrology. It's the fact that it is altering consciousness and altering behavior and raising our responses to a higher level. And that's why I keep doing this.
Yeah, I know. Me too.
Why am I doing it?
Right, I agree. It brings us all to, and these are big conversations that have to happen. We can't just constantly worry about if there's milk in the refrigerator. We have to talk about big topics because big topics are what moves society. They take a long time to happen. As you mentioned, the outer planets move slowly and events do unfold slowly. But it's in that slow process that we really do find evolution coming to fruition.
Agreed.
Yeah. So we've been talking about the asteroid Chiron, which we always in astrology we refer to it as the wounded healer. It is a place where we find an opportunity to heal, whatever that may be, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a job, whether it's with your mother, your father.
Only by healing others, only by helping others,
right,
does your pain go away.
Mm-hmm. And that's the greatest gift. And so that's what you do. When you are in pain, reach out to help others and the pain will abate.
Correct.
Yeah, and so Michael Lutin, we've been talking today with Michael Lutin. His website is michaellutin.com, Lutin.com. He's got a wonderful array of information there. He's on Facebook a lot. All the time you'll see him there. But he's also got his little private club up there. Why don't you talk a little bit about that before we sign off, Michael? I'd like people to know about that.
Well, it's, I think there's a public and private. It's really not really private. People can join and pay for it. But there's a free part of the site that I've been doing for years. And then there's a pay part where I'm doing slightly different things. Partly it's to give them, I'm writing a long piece called Humans Rising. I'm going to do an astrology course on that part. And people get discounts for doing that because I have to survive. And the club helps me because if anybody who joins, they do get discounts on stuff, whatever we're selling. But the real thing is that they're allowing me to do the work by supporting it. And that's why I do that.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful, mutually beneficial situation because it allows you to get your knowledge out there, and at the same time, people gain something from that. So again, that's michaellutin.com, Lutin, Michael, just as Michael usually is, and then it's one long string of words, Michael Lutin, one long word, michaellutin.com is his site. I encourage you to go there and check out his offerings and his writings and his materials. And by all means, definitely sign up for if you're going to the UAC. What UAC stands for is the United Astrology Conference, happening in Chicago in the end of May. And it's a gathering of all the local and national and international astrology groups under one umbrella where we all get together and sort of, rub shoulders and listen to people talk about great topics. And we get I get a great deal of energy from those meetings because I come away feeling like, we are on the right track. We are doing something. It's very easy for us as astrologers to get lost in our separate little worlds because we do speak a different language and not everybody speaks that language. So when we get together and we can speak the language, it's really liberating for us all. Well, Michael, I've had a great time talking with you today, as I always have, and I really enjoy your perception and your depth about the way you're going. I think this is a very important topic. I can certainly feel it. I've been thinking about this for quite some time. I feel what you're talking about. It's that sense of where we are and the decisions we must make and the angst that we're suffering under. And I think it is a very personal. It's a personal epiphany we have to go through. A decision has to be made. And it's a leveler because everyone feels it. Right.
Whether they want to acknowledge it or not, whether they can acknowledge it or not, everybody has something that is part of their shame and their regret and their self-recrimination. And that keeps them locked in a position.
Yeah.
And only when we can release that shame, regret, and self-recrimination, that's the only way we can move forward. And besides, if you didn't look back and see you were stupid, you didn't learn anything. So, right?
That's true.
So, exactly. So, yeah, you were stupid.
So what?
Now what?
Yeah, exactly. Next. Yeah, that's how we learn. We learn from our mistakes. Anyway, Michael, thank you so much for coming on today. It's always great to have hear your voice and get your wisdom. I'm looking forward to that great train ride. I hope we don't have an Agatha Christie mystery on our hands. I doubt we will, but it's there.
Well, we might. You keep saying that, so you keep saying that. Maybe we should probably think of doing something like that.
As long as we're not victims, and it'll be fun. It could be a fun thing. I could see you whipping up something kind of fun like that if I know you. So.
Well, right now I have nothing in my mind, but I'll think about it.
You will. I'm sure something will come. Anyway, we've been talking today with Michael Lutin. His website is michaellutin.com, Lutin. I encourage you to go there. Sign up for his little club up there. It's a fun thing. I think you'll enjoy the separate little thing he's got going on, the private. For members only, we could call it, and that's fun. So
anyway,
yeah,
it's called Lupo Vicis. That's the name of it.
Yeah. It sounds like something straight out of New Jersey, but we love it, and I think it's great. Hey,
Thanks
Michael, thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you, man.
You've been listening to Turning of the Wheel with your host, Chris Flisher. To schedule a reading with me or to order artwork, you may visit my website at www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. Or you can call me at 978-393-1036. Thank you. And as always, be open to possibilities.